Fantastic. So even though I just introduced everybody, I'd love to just start by going down the line one more time and everybody can share their name, their film, and then I would love it if you could talk specifically about the role or the roles that you filled on your production. I think that a lot of people up here did a lot of different things on their films, so I would love to just start by sharing that to frame our conversation. We can just go down the line to start. Jacob?
Hello, I'm Jacob Perdue. I created Matzo Ball Soup with Ketchup. I was mainly the photographer and director and editor for the film. It started out as a editing school project. I had spent, before I went to college, 7 years in the military as a combat photographer and videographer. So I was already kind of familiar with a lot of the editing techniques. So my professor, I asked my professor, can I make something, more experimental? I've been allowed to make anything like this. And so what became more of a sight and sound kind of film became a film of authenticity.
Beautiful.
Hi, I'm Miryam Sas, and I made The Road, and this is only my second short digital experimental conceptual thing and first time in a festival, so thank you for coming. It's really interesting to see it on the big screen, and I kind of just made like it was just me and like a couple of former students. In my regular life, I'm a scholar of Japanese avant-gardes. But I do teach experimental film, and so my students make things, and it made me want to make something.
Hi, I'm Becca Willow Moss. I'm the director, writer, and performer of Goodbye, Dolly.
Wonderful. So I actually I had a bunch of questions written down here, but I also am just really going to try to listen and go with the flow as much as possible. It's always a challenge when you're moderating, a conversation among three filmmakers that each have their own unique film. And as everybody saw here, there's so much individuality and style in each one of these films. So my challenge was very interesting to kind of try to find threads that connect these things. The first thing is that all of these were the world premiere, correct? So this is the first time, yeah, props. I'm just curious to know how it felt for the first time to be watching the movie on a big screen with an audience. And let's start down at the other end with Willow.
Yeah, it's a real privilege to be here with you all, so thank you for watching that. I would say that it feels surreal. That's the word I will land on, surreal. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I definitely see themes like we've got the matzo ball action going on, gefilte fish, very referred to. Pesach is here. So those are the two. Should have had little Anna Bibic eating a matzo ball or something. But I guess her little squirrely thing looks a little matzo ball-y.
It's all a creative process. Initially, I thought that they were making clay matzo balls.
But that would have worked. That would have worked. I didn't know.
I think it's okay that you didn't make that choice, though.
Okay, thanks. So how did it feel? It feels great. I mean, it's interesting. The whole, my mom is here and her friends, and so, being in Philly, seeing this incredible museum, and I really appreciate the venue to, potentially keep on making things.
What about you, Jacob?
It feels great to show Matzo Ball Soup with Ketchup here on the big screen at the Weitzman Museum. What became a very kind of personal, scholarly project kind of transformed into this beautiful thing. And I love seeing it on the big screen, and I love to share, Beth Eriker's kind of wit with everybody.
So does she really eat ketchup on matzo balls?
Yeah. So my wife's
that is
here.
Shocking.
My wife's here, Marissa Perdue, with her friend Maya, and she was in the film as well. She was cutting the margarine that's too big.
That's really interesting. Do you guys think? Are you going to try that?
Maybe. Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
I loved your nails, though.
It's in the soup.
In the soup. Oh, you squirt a little ketchup in the chicken soup? Oh, into the soup. So it's like a little tomato. Okay. That's kind of Sephardic. I'm okay with that. Sorry to...
Perfect. Great. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Jacob, about watching the film on a big screen for the first time?
No, I'm just feel very proud and glad to share this film, which was mostly being viewed on a laptop, and now it's here at the National Jewish Museum. That means a lot.
It's really fun to get, in that little editing box for weeks, months, years, and then to see the images, to see your face, or your character's face is blown up 15, 20, 25 feet tall. I think that the movies just move and breathe in much more welcoming ways. Anyways, I'm very curious to know what was the seed of each of these films for you? What was the moment, or was there a sort of single catalyzing moment that you started to realize, oh, this is a story that I want to tell, and film is the way to tell it? So let's start with you, Miryam, and discussing The Road. If you
Sure.
would.
So I went to Ukraine, which used to be Galicia, used to be Poland, where my mom is from and my grandmother is from. We went to the town that they were from because it had relatively newly opened, and I was able to discover, walk around the town, and we met the last Jewish person who lived there, who told us that there was a certain spot down the road. This is the town of Sparash. There was a spot down the road where the road was starting to crumble, and you would be able to see these Jewish gravestones that had been used as foundations under the road. And I had never heard, this was apparently a thing, as Professor John Efron told in the voiceover, this was a thing all over Eastern Europe, but I hadn't heard of it, and it really shocked me. So we went looking, and I imagined maybe making like an art installation where we dug it up and we filmed the digging up or something like that. But I didn't get to do that, and the war started in Ukraine. So I found myself sort of sitting in Berkeley just thinking about how under every road there's something, but of course the Jewish situation is very particular. So I made, this film with the historians and Jewish studies scholars talking about that phenomenon. And then in my original idea, I wanted to see like a little girl who's living above those roads today. Like I imagined her just kind of eating a bowl of cereal or something, but her dad got creative. And so, she's there, she's in war-torn Ukraine, but she's being creative inside her room with her little snail named Jerry and drawing him and making clay. So she's also working with very earth things. So thematically, it seemed to go together with the idea of the gravestones under the ground and the earth and all that. So that was kind of the way.
Sort of manifestation of the cycle of life and death and creation and revision and rebirth. I really liked how those two things moved together in there. Let's kick it down to Willow now to talk about, this wild meta theatrical, kind of autobiographical, kind of like revisionist Broadway show. What was the first thing that set this project into motion for you?
Yeah, I spent, and thank you for those glowing remarks. I spent a lot of my time in retirement homes when I was young. I found that the elderly people around me really loved to hear musicians come in and sing for them, and their faces would light up when we would play old pantos on the big screen for them. So I think that always established how accessible the medium of film could be for someone of that age. And then when my dad passed away, I realized there was a lot left unsaid and a lot more I wish I could have asked him. And when I wrote the eulogy, I was still in high school, and it brought me so much comfort to write his eulogy. And it encouraged me to ask other people about their lives and what they would want to be remembered for, just in case, no. But also just to encourage them themselves to think about the highlights before it's too late.
And Jacob, you had mentioned that this grew out of a project in school, correct?
Yeah, so I spent 7 years in the military as like I said, as a combat documentation production specialist, basically making videos for the military. I deployed everywhere. And so I left the military, and I'm here at, I'm at George Mason University, at their wonderful film program. And I'm sort of taking these classes that are kind of classes that are kind of reteaching me these tools. And for the first time, it just clicked. And I said, I want to make something personal. I want to take all of these skills, and I want to take all of these feelings that I have about this medium and make something a little bit more personal. So it mostly grew out of kind of an inspiration from a couple of films, mostly Fake Fruit Factory, which is a wonderful experimental film, and of course Martin Scorsese's Italian American, which is also about the roots of an Italian family, his family growing up in America. So what became the film that you saw, you kind of saw the shift in the middle of the film. So at first you're kind of wondering, why am I just watching this film about this, this person making matzo balls? And then, Beth, my mother-in-law, just opens up. She just opens up and she becomes the main focus, the main character of the film. And so that documentarian part of me just flipped on, and I just kept encouraging to keep talking. So.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I would love it if filmmakers are asking other filmmakers
yeah,
questions.
because I think that's such a huge contrast, thinking about you out there, like in war situations. I think ours both have something to do with memorialization and all that, but that you go from, it sounds like really scary places where you're filming combat to this really humorous, intimate, very personal. I love like the textures of the matzo ball and stuff like that. That I'm just thinking about that contrast. Maybe you could talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so as far as that contrast, as far as my warfare experience having deployed to the Middle East, it really wasn't that bad. It's kind of like living in Israel, so it's mostly just rocket attacks and the occasional drone, which are scary, very scary experiences. So I was very lucky that I didn't actually have to go out and document combat. However,
But it does link to the first film, though.
Oh, it does. It does. That was funny. That I didn't really think about that. But yeah, it was more of just the restriction, because the military is more worried about their direct messaging, their public affairs, or it's completely strategic and no one sees it. So this was both something everyone can see, and that I had in collaborative and creative control with who I wanted to collaborate, which was with my wife's mother, Beth Eriker, amazing woman, by the way. Just like the film, she's just like that all the time.
Thank you.
Mother-in-law brownie points right there.
yeah.
There's a thread that I recognized that I thought connected your three films. And I think that all of the films in their own way are exploring how Jewish history impacts our current Jewish identity and how we see ourselves. And so I was curious to know, and maybe we'll start again at the end with Willow. I'm kind of just curious to know if consciously Jewish tradition and Jewish history and things like that are impacting the stories that you choose to tell and how you choose to tell them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when my grandfather would talk, he was a man of few words, but he would never say anything that had nothing to do with what he had experienced during his time in the Second World War. And growing up I'm from Canada originally. Growing up there, he always assured me that I was not Canadian, that I was Jewish. And for me, my interpretation of that resulted in this art house film. But I think that I continue to try and find new voices in the Jewish community to shed light on, because we need to do that.
All right, so Jewish history. So in April, I'm publishing a book called Milk in an Eggshell that contains my mother and grandmother's story in World War II, mixed with like my story of searching for that history and going back to Ukraine, sort of the context of this film. So yeah, there's always more to know. I realize there's so much. I want to know Polish. I want to know Hebrew. Like, I started out with French and Japanese, but those are my languages on my bucket list, or I'm just a little ways in. So there's really so much to learn, and grandparents who wrote in Polish, who wrote in Hebrew, and being able to read their letters would be really cool. So I just feel like there's an infinite amount there. But at the same time, there's kind of the intersectional histories. Like in Berkeley, there's a lot of Native peoples who are protesting against the use of our parking lots in Berkeley that used to be shell mounds or used to be, Native burial sites. So under the Berkeley roads, there's also a lot of history. So I guess for me, the dilemma is, at what time or to what extent to keep the focus in Jewish history and go deep there, and at which point should this film also be kind of about everybody in, or that other identities and other histories could also resonate with it.
Absolutely. That's such an interesting point that you bring up, and it's such a fine line that you have to walk of celebrating what makes you unique and also recognizing that there are so many sort of rhymes and overlaps and things like that. And so trying to have, these two opposite things of this is our story and this is everybody's story, and trying to strike a balance between that. It's really beautiful. And I think your film totally
I kind of had to decide, am I going to put in the credits, filmed on Ohlone land or something like that? And I didn't, but I could have. I don't know. It's a tough call.
It is a tough call. And I don't even, because in the description I read that it's actually shot on the Berkeley roads. Is that correct?
Yeah, those are Berkeley. So
they're
it was shot at the time when, you couldn't really go to Ukraine.
Yeah.
So that's why I had to get WhatsApp footage.
Exactly. And it doesn't necessarily,
but it's kind of an analogy.
It doesn't negatively impact it in any way. It's very much, and then like you said, it brings up that interesting question of whose story is this? And even if it's specific to Jewish people, you can look at any road and basically find some version of erasure there. So
but I think the Eastern European one is extremely egregious, and using it as, under layers under pavement is extremely shocking.
Yeah.
But I also feel like I have a very metonymic imagination, somehow the Berkeley roads are standing in for those roads, and for many other roads where these things took place.
Absolutely. Jacob, why don't you jump in on that and talk for a moment about your role as an artist, and then how that connects to your if you think of yourself as a specifically Jewish artist.
So as far as being a Jewish artist, so I'm actually a convert. So I converted to Judaism. So I always had an outsider's perspective. I was coming into Judaism. And as far as bringing that outsider into that world, that was basically my philosophy while shooting it, was let me just be cinema verite, let me be a fly on the wall, and just let everything happen in front of me, and let everything just be as it is and be authentic. And so that allowed Beth and to open up about what she thought about contemporary times, talking about her stories with the other matriarchs of her family, her grandmother, her mother, and then bringing in her two daughters, my wife Marissa, her sister Kyla, and kind of bridging the gap between sort of the Jewish female tradition and how that passes down, and showing how cyclical that was.
Beautiful. Let me check on the time. I think, Larry, you said we should try to be done by maybe about 10 more minutes or so. Yeah. Perfect. So I have, some more questions that I'm interested to ask, but I would love to open it up to the audience for a minute to see if anybody, and I'll even come closer to see if anyone is raising their hands or anything like that. Any questions? If nobody has any questions, I'm happy to keep asking questions. Yes?
One of the comments I have is that there was a film here the other day called Among Neighbors, and it had one of the things about this small town is that people, after all the Jews left and were taken by the Germans, they were using the gravestone as grinding stones and all that. So I don't know if you've seen it, but seeing yours, And I'm really glad you discussed parts of it, because parts of it I was wondering about. You know, I mean, I was seeing the road because I thought, well, this has a lot of story, and the film doesn't illustrate, actually, for me, the story. I mean, there were no cemeteries, no graves, but yes, in that film too, it talked about how bones come up. Anyway, but I saw it as like the road of life, journeying. And I mean, I know later I saw that, well, the story also was, you know, very interesting. So I'm just saying it's, you know, at first I thought, well, there's the story, but why is it this footage? But, you know, later it sank in. I'm just saying. But if you haven't seen Among Neighbors, see it. It was 2 days ago here. It was one of the best in the film festival.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for that comment. And yeah, I have kind of an abstract way of thinking. So rather than putting a direct footage of like Jewish cemeteries or something, putting like the thing that you see that you don't know has this history underneath and plus also just the contingent fact of like, if I could have, I would have gone to Ukraine and filmed the actual roads that had this under it. But because I couldn't, it was like I was feeling that distance also and somehow inscribing that in there. But afterwards, I did learn that, you know, in the Jewish Museum I think it's in Krakow, the Museum of Jewish Life in Poland or something, they had an exhibition with similar topics, and they talked about how after the war, Torah scrolls, the parchment that is Torah scrolls are made of, were used. They found them in like shoes. People use them as like the inner layer of like insoles and stuff like that. So, and they found the grinding stones, the cemeteries as grinding stones. So there's really a lot of kind of material aftermath that is hard to look at.
You know, they were going to auction off things, and they decided not to. And, you know, from the Holocaust, I don't know if it was in the news that they were going to auction off these things that were possessions during the Holocaust, and you know, kind of had an outcry.
Yeah, that was something that actually in the interview with Professor Efron, he really emphasized. He called the Holocaust the biggest heist in history, just in terms of the amount of material goods that were taken. But I didn't want to emphasize the money side of it so much, but it was, for him, that was really a central element. And of course, there's all the wonderful movies and stories about families reclaiming their art pieces from museums and places where they were sold or stored, taken away from the families and things like that. So there's a lot of stories connected to this. So thank you.
I think also what connects each of these three films is they make a bold, formal choice that there could have been an easier form for the story to be told, but by telling the story in the way that each of you chose to tell it, it ultimately, for the right audience, sort of deepens the level of engagement and embodies the thematic questions of the work, which is how all three of these, resonated with me, be it, the incredibly sort of like ambitious choice for you to like focus on hands, disciplined, not show faces. For, how long is the short?
It's about 20 minutes.
Yeah, about 20 minutes. Like 20 minutes on hands is like totally radical, and the only reason that you would do that is if it, ties into a deeper thematic question having to do with, I mean, my take on it, it's about what Jewish people show the world and what we feel like we have to hide from the world and the relationship between domestic spaces and public spaces. And by focusing on the hands, you're really making that choice, and similarly, it would be much easier to do a talking heads documentary, right? Of just one of these professors that you have in voiceover. And I actually think it's incredibly bold and ambitious whenever a documentarian sort of untethers audio from video, and you get more of a juxtaposition and stuff like that. And I think that when you're hiding the sort of story of the film, again, that's tying into like Jewish erasure and things like that. And, you know, I mean, and of course, like, you know, your film, Willow, is just, you know, such an extreme example of like formal rigor in terms of just sticking to this like meta narrative structure, because it was the best way that you could like there isn't even a fourth wall in your movie. It's just like you've moved beyond that and you're onto the fifth dimension at this point.
Well, thank you for that. I think like when I was younger and I was seeing these elderly people at their last days, pardon the sharing of this anecdote, I saw that they had no ability to hide their vulnerabilities. And I think in theater, that fourth wall can often make the audience feel that way because they don't expect it. And just being a one-woman show, as it was a metaphor for how I had seen so many women that I took care of experience their lives just alone. So it's not the happiest note, but hopefully we can encourage community.
Yeah, I think that like ours are very more verite, like kind of durational.
It's super,
you know, I love
experimental
Ackerman and stuff.
yeah.
So, you know, like making things last for a really long time to the point where it's kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And-
like durational cinema.
Oh, there was a question.
So this is actually a question for for Hello Dolly, and or Goodbye Dolly, actually. Thank you. And we actually haven't talked about the theme or one of the themes in the film, which is the eating disorder. And clearly it was, if not the sub-theme, the main theme, the sub-theme. And I just wanted to know, I sometimes I think people are uncomfortable with it, perhaps afraid to talk about it. And I just like your thoughts on it. Were you wanting to make it accessible or uncomfortable? Or if you could just talk about it a little bit, because we haven't brought it up, and I think it's something we should probably hear from you about.
Great question. Thank you for asking. I think that my experience in my youth was that it was never brought up. And I think that the character, who is inhabited by me, says at one point that there's a performance of these modes to grieving that she sees. And then as soon as the mirrors are uncovered, everyone goes back to performing again. And so I think with the character's experience of the eating disorder, it's part of her experience. It's not her only one, but the visuals cannot be unseen. They don't remain unseen. So I think, like many people who are experiencing illness, they don't know how to ask for help. So saying it and having the audience feel helpless to witnessing is part of what is hopefully going to encourage systemic change. Hope that answered your question.
All right, that's a beautiful last question from the audience. And I just quickly want to go down the line one more time so that everybody can share what's next for your film, and how can people follow you as an artist, support you as an artist, support your work moving forward. We'll just go down the line in just the way that we started it. Jacob.
Yeah, so as far as this film, I'm sure at some point I'll just publicly release it and people can just kind of freely watch it online and share it as they please. The best way to find out when that happens, or just to follow my work in general, whether it's my photography or my filmmaking, is my Instagram page, JPXMil, JPEXMIL. You can also reach out to me via email, jperdue, Perdue, 5@gmu.edu.
I'm not very active on social media, but if you Google my name, you can find my email easily, and I have a website.
I have a website, and my Instagram is just my name, so Becca Willow, BECCAWILLOW, and my next thing that I'm doing is a feature film in Israel about procreation.
About procreation?
Yeah.
All right, that's hot. And if anybody wants to find anyone on Instagram easily, I did a sort of group post yesterday where I think that all of these filmmakers are collaborators or tagged in that. So if you just go on the Philly JFM Instagram, you'll be able to find information about everybody up here and me as well. Thank you again to the Weitzman. Thank you to Philly JFM. Thank you to Kristen, to Larry, to Beth, to Paige, to the rest of the team for curating such a beautiful festival.